Joining us on POTUS is Dr. Bill Rosenberg. He is a professor of political science at Drexel University. He tweets at Dr. B. Rosenberg. Bill, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Good morning.
Boy, there's so much we could talk about, but I guess the number one story is obviously the government is on the verge of running out of money by Friday. Republicans are talking about a continuing resolution. Democrats may or may not make DACA a part of this spending bill. In other words, as a bargaining chip. I guess, forget about all the language about what was said at meetings and so on and so forth, unless you want to go there. But is this possible government shutdown, is this a winner for anybody, either Republicans or Democrats?
From my standpoint, it's not. It's basically a situation where both sides lose. You have a variety of different agendas being played out here. But my political sense is that as we get closer and closer to this deadline, things will probably change at the last moment. One of the things that we need to recognize is that most of the time when we're in these crises, the government ends up kicking the can down the road and, in a sense, passing some type of temporary spending bill. I think that may happen again. And one of the related items to this is the role that DACA plays in this. And I think that President Trump, while it's tough to read the tea leaves a little bit in his meandering public performance at a negotiation session the other day, said that he wanted DACA. So if he has some element of believing that that's what he possibly wants, he himself can simply issue an extension of DACA and take it off the table for this immediate crisis. So he alone can take that out of the political equation. It may cost him something in terms of some of his supporters, but it will spare members of Congress from having to face the wrath of voters.
Bill, looking at 2018, obviously this is part of the figuring. In other words, Republicans and Democrats are viewing everything or much of what they're doing right now through the filter of the midterm elections. You've tweeted that the number of Senate and House Republicans who have announced that they will not run continues to make it a little easier for Democrats in 2018. Do you think that's because they feel threatened, or do you think it's just all personal, or is it a combination of the two?
Probably a combination, but I think the threat of having to run and lose is a very particular problem that many politicians face, including President Trump. I think that at the end of the day, as we get closer to the 2020 election, the president will have to make a decision about whether or not he wants to risk losing or staying and fighting to get a second term. We have a variety of people that have dropped out. One of the early ones was someone like Jason Chaffetz, who has decided that he wants to leave Congress. He's got a very powerful position, but he decided that he wanted to leave and run for governor. Those types of political ambitions come up. But you also have people like Darrell Isis from California, who's decided he's not going to run, partly because even though he's has a lot of power, thinks that he may not win again. You have the governor, senator from Utah, Orrin Hatch, who at much of the pleading of Donald Trump decided not to run, which has really opened up the door for the Romney team to be able to come in and win potentially a seat in Utah. So there's a variety of different things in play.
Yeah, the Darrell Issa, by the way, you said ISIS, but obviously
sorry.
He was that to a lot of Democrats, though, quite frankly, when he was head of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. But what you're saying is interesting, and it shows that the shifting demographics may be taking a toll 10 years almost after, it's 8 years after the Republicans had their big win and took over the House. I guess the question is also, which way are they going to be pushed on this bill? Because I am hearing more of this. Well, for example, Chelsea Manning has now announced that she is running for Senate, the former Bradley Manning. She is running for Senate against Ben Cardin. And I say against him because whatever Republican, but that's pretty much going to be a Democratic state, regardless of who winds up being the Democratic nominee. She doesn't have much of a chance. But there's a lot of pressure being brought to bear from the left on Democrats. And I'm wondering, what is going to be their rallying cry for the election in 2018? Is it going to be, hey, vote for me so I can take more power away from Donald Trump? Or is it going to be something else, a vision for a better America for Democrats?
Well, I think what we have to recognize is that even Democrats who've run for president have a lot of times said, look, it's the economy, stupid. but going back to the Clinton period. I think that the fact that the economy is strong is going to be a big lever for Republicans, but at the same time, I think it's going to be combated by various social issues, the issues about racism in the United States, the issues about immigration is important, even though it may not impact how everyone votes, it's going to impact a number of people. We also have sort of the veiled future of cutbacks in the safety and security net with things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, things like that. And those are going to impact different constituencies, particularly the young and also minorities as well. So we saw, since Donald Trump has come into office, the rise of this term, the resistance. And the resistance is really something that is made up of a number of different groups. And on occasion, they show up and they make a big difference. We saw that also take place in terms of the Alabama election. So the Republicans are facing a number of different challenges from a number of different groups. And I think that in many ways, a lot of those in the resistance are part of the Democratic constituency, and they're probably going to come out and support Democratic candidates, which basically is a frightful situation for Republicans running for office. You have to realize that there are 34 seats up in 2018. Most of them are held by Democrats. Incumbents generally win. And if the Republicans lose 2 seats, they're going to lose control of the Senate. The typical role is that for the House in out elections, there's about a 30-vote flip-flop between the party in power and out of power. And I think that plays a tremendous role in terms of what might happen in terms of legislation as well as potentially impeachment processes.
And as we look at 2020, I just want to get your take on something, Bill. I know you study a lot of this on the history and how presidents present themselves. And I wonder, is Donald Trump, in the way that Ronald Reagan was a president of change, in the way that Bill Clinton was, and Barack Obama, they were change candidates, and they changed in some ways the way politics operated. I wonder, is Donald Trump a change agent in politics, or is his success only, is it unique to him and cannot be duplicated?
Well, I find it hard to imagine that there are going to be that many politicians who are going to become president of the United States who take his tactic. I think his approach basically is to shake things up. And at the last moment, he changes his position, which gives him new angles to be able to negotiate. And I think that's what we're seeing right now with regards to DACA. We saw that with regards to the tax changes that came into play. He has certain agenda items. He also has an agenda item where he says, look, I'm going to sign something and I want to get a win here. I think if there is a possibility that Donald Trump can negotiate a way to get his name on something that he in some ways feels is a good idea, he's going to do it. But it's not necessarily just Donald Trump that has done this. Barack Obama did largely the same thing with the health care reform, Obamacare. He wanted something passed. He probably would have been more comfortable with a single-payer system, but in the end, he was able to achieve success going down the road towards more health care for Americans, and he was willing to accept that. Obama was probably less overt in terms of his push to get something out there, but Donald Trump, very much the salesman, wants to say, look what I've accomplished. His statements where he said, I passed more legislation than any president in history during the first year, was kind of a dubious claim. He included executive orders and signing statements, things like that, and they weren't major pieces of legislation. So he has a political role. I don't think it's going to be very much duplicated in the future, but for at least for the next 3 years, that's going to be the way politics rolls.
Dr. Bill Rosenberg, as always, thank you so much for joining us on POTUS today.
Have a great day.
Dr. William Rosenberg, professor of political science at Drexel University, joining us to discuss the issues of facing this president. I think with the quote of the day, I may be wrong, President Barack Obama was less overt than Donald Trump. He's tweeting at Dr. B. Rosenberg.